Guys, Karmakut released the second devlog for his upcoming tactical shooter, Bellum. I'm sure you've seen it already, and this is a game that I'm personally very excited for. So today we're going to be indulging in a little bit of analysis and speculation on what we know about this game, my thoughts on how its confirmed features relate to realism, and some things that I think will be cool to see from the final product. So nothing too crazy, just a little bit of fun. I'll put a link to the original devlog in the description if you want to go watch that. Otherwise, let's dive right in. Okay, so right off the bat, 7 seconds in, we catch a glimpse of the medical menu here, and I want to take a second to dive into this. After some thinking, I think we can actually infer from this one image what Bellum's medical system might play like. If any of you guys here have played Arma 3, maybe on KC Liberation, this looks similar to the interface used for mods like Ace 3, Cat Medical, or Advanced Combat Medical. From the last devlog, we know that Bellum will have a realistic medical system using supplies like bandages, tourniquets, drugs, and blood bags. We also know that this medical system is only a starting point and is planned to be developed in realism and complexity as the player base's skill set grows over time. And I think this screenshot just helps us fill in the blanks of what that starting point is going to look like. To be clear, everything I'm about to say is merely my speculation on how things might work, and it isn't reflective of how the final game will actually be like. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of my interpretation, or if you have any thoughts of your own. In the center here, you have a human figure which shows where you have been wounded and to what degree. It's a classic interface. You can see some shaded portions showing what parts are damaged, some red diamonds showing where the player's been shot. On the left side, it's showing that with the right arm selected, it is currently bleeding and has 2 wounds on it that have yet to be treated. The right side of the menu starts to get interesting as we have a couple of items here. We have stims or stimulants, depressants, and blood bags. In the lower right is the player's blood meter, which has 2 critical thresholds labeled INCAP for incapacitation and UNCON for unconscious. In the lower right is the player's pain meter. Based on this, I think that the medical gameplay will revolve around managing players' blood and pain using the various tools given to the player. So bandages and tourniquets will be used to stop active bleeding and prevent that blood meter from draining, while blood bags will be used to replenish lost blood and refill that blood meter. Now things get a little bit more hazy when it comes to stimulants and depressants. These are pretty general terms, but in the little icons here, we've got what looks like an EpiPen and some painkiller pills. And this leads me to believe that stims are going to refer to drugs like epinephrine, which I was surprised to learn technically isn't a stimulant, but a vasopressor. However, based on this icon, I'm going to continue to assume stim is an analog to something like epinephrine, which in the context of battlefield medicine is used, among other things, to treat hypovolemic shock, which is what happens when you lose a large amount of blood due to wounds, eventually leading to organ failure and eventually death. So my guess here is that past one of these critical thresholds marked on the blood meter, simply stopping hemorrhaging or using blood bags to replenish blood won't be enough to treat the wounded player, instead requiring the use of a stim to simulate more advanced treatment for players in a critical condition, sort of like epinephrine does in the real world. Similarly, I think that the depressant drugs will be a tool tied to the pain mechanic. Conceivably, the more a player gets banged up, the more pain a player will experience, potentially causing debilitating effects such as reduced movement speed, increased weapon sway, or reduced peripheral vision. Therefore, I think that depressants is a general term for anesthetics like morphine, fentanyl, or ketamine to treat the pain and remove those debuffs to the player. Again, if you're being anal about things, not all depressants are anesthetics, including opioids like morphine and fentanyl, but this is the interpretation that makes most sense to me based off of the information that we have. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like seriously, this isn't engagement bait. I genuinely want to know what you guys think. Overall though, I think we're looking at a medical system that's a step above your typical HP only and revive systems like you find in Battlefield and Squad, and this takes after more realistic shooters like modded Arma 3 and maybe Escape from Tarkov, which I think is pretty awesome. Okay, let's talk about Bellum's main game mode, which the devlog revealed. It will be called Occupation, and it shares a lot of similarities with the old Dynamic Direction game mode mod that Karmakut's community had developed for Squad, which I described in my last video covering Bellum's first devlog. I'll include a link to the original video describing Dynamic Direction in the description as well. For Bellum, Occupation is an asymmetric game mode where a conventional force battles a guerrilla force for control over a randomly placed area of operations or AO within a larger 4x4 kilometer map. The conventional forces build a single combat outpost or COP. The guerrillas build multiple hideouts to generate what's called influence within the AO, which if you generate enough of, you win. But each side can also win by attriting the enemy force so that they have no one left, or by displacing the enemy force outside of the AO. My main question though is this intended to be played with respawns? Or is it a one life game mode? Or will they make it so that you can play with or without respawns according to player preference? I don't know. Personally, as a hardcore Milsim, I'd love to see at least the option for a one life game mode, or at least a spawn system that's sufficiently punishing to create heavy incentives to not die. Basically, I want to avoid the die, respawn, repeat phenomena you see in games like Squad. I find that Occupation's asymmetric structure is a great way to portray the game's setting of an infantry-centric counterinsurgency type conflict in Africa. The influence mechanic is an interesting abstraction of the complicated factors that go into a counterinsurgency campaign, such as control over the civilian population. I will highlight one thing that Karma says here. He says that as they further develop the Occupation game mode, they'll add more factions, add more win conditions or ways to win, and support symmetrical engagements. Think two conventional forces battling it out. And I'm assuming this is referring to the Ranger Regiment faction battling with the Russian PMC faction, both of which have been confirmed in the first devlog. Overall, it appears that the Bellum team is creating a foundation with room for further growth, using new factions, different types of symmetry, and different ways to win, which I think is flexible and great. And next is my favorite part. The devlog showcases Bellum's mechanics for crew-served M240 medium machine guns. Seriously, as someone who used to be part of a machine gun crew in real life, this makes me incredibly happy, albeit I crewed a 50 cal, not an M240 medium machine gun. But I digress. Any machine gunner worth their salt will tell you that in the real world, a machine gun is not operating to its full potential without at least two people working it, and I've always wanted a game that found a way to portray that. Here, the devlog showcases Bellum's system of belt linking, which is a way for an assistant gunner to keep the machine gun supplied with an uninterrupted flow of ammunition, which negates the need to go through a lengthy reload process and allows the gun to maintain sustained automatic fire. It's a big reason why medium machine guns are so powerful, because you have that extra pair of hands to help with this, as well as extra packs to carry more ammo. For a more concrete showcase of how this can be beneficial tactically, you can go and check out my recent Arma 3 video where I am part of an MG team in the COG Platoon Weapons Squad. The devlog also mentions that the team will be implementing barrel swapping, which is crucial for managing the extreme heat that builds up in a machine gun after sustained fire, which in turn negatively affects the gun's accuracy and reliability. And they'll also be implementing tripods. Tripods are incredibly important, and people often think that they're the same thing as bipods, but they're not. They enable MGs to dominate at longer engagement ranges with that extra bit of stability and are a key driver for why they require well-drilled crews. Seriously, a bipod just can't compete with the tripod. They're not the same thing. I just hope that Bellum will implement tripods in a more flexible way than the buildable static emplacements we often see in games like Squad or Arma Reforger. I'd like to see something that can be carried, set up, broken down, scooted to the side, and also maybe used with or without a traverse and elevation or T&E mechanism, which is a huge component of what makes a tripod so effective in the first place. Now, despite all these crew serve mechanics, it's important to remember that the devlog says you can still operate the M240 solo as you can IRL, just with reduced speed and effectiveness, so it's not simply an artificial gameplay limitation. Next, we have demolition systems. The devlog states it'll be a key part of the Occupation game mode to destroy objectives, but they also say that they're going to have more types of charges and fuses coming in the future, which is very interesting to me because demolitions are also an important part of advanced infantry tactics, particularly for breaching or the destruction and denial of enemy equipment after a firefight, especially if you're part of a patrol. Patrol operations are a super underrated topic within the Milsim community, which I hope to cover in depth in the future, but for now, what I'm getting from the description of the Occupation game mode is that patrol type operations are intended to be a core part of the game's Milsim. Karma even states that the conventional forces will use patrols to find and take out guerrilla hideouts. Now, at the risk of starting to rattle off a Christmas wish list of features, for which I apologize to the devs, I'd just like to say that from a realism standpoint, it will be kind of cool to see the devs take this demolition system even further, expand its role in the game, and introduce something that can be used for the likes of door breaching, mouse holing, and blowing up enemy equipment during the post-assault and withdrawal phases of a firefight. Doubly so because obtaining equipment and supplies is a key part of growing and sustaining an insurgency, the denial of which being key for counterinsurgency, which would mean that such mechanics could play well into the game's theme. I just think it might be cool, but maybe I'm off the mark here. Let me know what you guys think. The devlog also shows off some of Bellum's progress with grenades. Now I'm going to gloss over the showcase of the different grenades. Again, you can watch the original video for that. Let's skip ahead to where they show that the game is actively simulating in real time the grenade's fragmentation, which is intended to interact with the medical system for a more realistic portrayal of a grenade's wounding effects, resulting in a more authentic game balance than the instant kill grenades many other games feature. If you've read any memoirs from soldiers or watched any combat footage, you'll know that instant kill grenades are at best an incomplete portrayal, at worst a very unrealistic portrayal of how grenades actually work. Also, not all grenades are created equal. Modern grenade designs such as the South Korean K413 have over 1,000 preformed tungsten fragments that are extremely deadly, while older grenade designs like the F1 have fragmenting outer casings that are far more inconsistent in their fragmentation patterns and lethality. It's very cool to see that the game has the technical potential to portray this level of nuance, but it remains to be seen whether they actually implement these details in the final game. Next, Bellum features a pretty advanced ballistic simulation for the weapons, which, I quote, accounts for muzzle velocity, temperature, wind, air density, drag, projectile mass and volume, acceleration over time for things like RPGs with rocket motors, and even supersonic versus subsonic versus transonic aerodynamics, as well as the terminal ballistics of how rounds impact, ricochet, and interact with various barriers including wood, concrete, and metal. Now, some people might think that this type of simulation is over the top. Others might think that this is nothing revolutionary. I just think that it speaks to the team's commitment to realism, and that maybe there is a chance that the aforementioned grenade nuances could actually be implemented. Now, while your typical player might not always notice all of these systems at play in shorter engagement ranges, if the devs do later add roles like snipers or marksmen, or even if people engage in longer range firefights, those situations will require players to have actual knowledge and training for long range marksmanship. At the very least, it's our first indication that the game's environmental factors, such as the wind, will have tangible effects on gameplay. That's cool. We have yet to see how all of this will pan out in the final game, but as long as they deliver on what they're showcasing here, I think this is looking pretty promising. And finally, for all you gear nerds out there, the devlog showed off some art assets. They showed us what looks like an NGAL laser aiming module by L3 Harris, an EOTech EXPS hollow sight, an RPG-7, and a very brief animation of a Russian GM94 pump action grenade launcher, which has a tube magazine carrying 3 grenades. Other than that, Karmakut hints that development will be picking up this summer and that the next devlog will come out with a Q&A segment. So there's a lot to look forward to here. You can go and ask your questions right now on their Discord linked below, but I'm just going to say, check out the frequently asked questions channel first. There's a good chance that your initial burning questions are already answered there. Otherwise, these were just my first thoughts after watching the devlog. I'm curious to know what you guys think. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching.